Today we're going to work on a 2003 Jeep Grand Cherokee, which has a leak on the power steering, power fluid system somewhere. We think it's related to a hose, so we went ahead and pre-ordered some hoses. We're going to go ahead and do the discharge and the return lines, just because the year, thing's quite a few miles and years on it. And so we're going to go ahead and replace those hoses, and while we're in there, we'll evaluate any other possible leak sources like seals and the like. So anyway, so we're going to get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the air intake box. It's right over the power steering, or the steering system. And so we're going to go ahead and set this aside. And then down inside here, you'll see a bolt straight way down in here. I think it's a number 15. Alright, so we'll get a number 15. We'll remove this box, get out of the way, and then we'll get back with you. Alright, so there are two more bolts than what I indicated. There's one inside here. It's a 13, not 15. There's a 13 in here, and there's a 13 back behind the box against the wheel well. And then down here in the front, on the very bottom, there's also a 13. That's kind of fun to get to, but it comes out. Alright, so we removed the air filter box. We left this one bolt in place down here, and we just slipped it back off of it. It's got a fork foot that slides up underneath there. So that's out, and now it's on to our pipes and hoses. Perhaps you can't see too good, but this is the return line right here, and we're going to take it off first. That hose is just going to be replaced on the line. It's not a high pressure line, or as high a pressure. But we're going to go ahead and get out of the way because we need it to get to the high pressure line. We need to get this out of the way. So we're going to go ahead. This is a number 18 millimeter. So we're going to go ahead and remove this little wonder. I don't have a flare fitting wrench or a tube wrench that works, so I'm just using a standard 18 on this one, and we're going to pull it. Now right now we also have a drain pan underneath the car, because we expect to drain out a considerable amount of our fluid. I'm sure the reservoir will be quite empty before it's all over, and so we're doing that too. Now we can get to the high pressure, which is also an 18 millimeter, which means that our flare nut wrenches won't work very well, but that's okay. It's coming off quite easy. So we're going to go ahead now and remove from the steering box the high pressure line. And the high pressure line, the replacement part, single piece, because it's high pressure. And for some reason this one's loose, so we're going to have to check on that. That should not be loose. Maybe part of our issues.
Oh, it's good to
So we're good on that. So we've got this box disconnected. Now it's time to come up to the top box. Alright, turns out that one was loose because we had a little help earlier getting that one loose. So we're going to go ahead and take that one the rest of the way off. And while she's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and take off this, back in the back of the pump, I'm going to take off this low pressure return line. First needle nose, and just remove that clamp back there. Alright, so we'll get all this off and then we'll come back to you. Alright, so just to kind of give you a review of what we're seeing, we're not seeing a definitive leak, an obvious place where there's a tear in the hose or a kink in the tubing. But what we are seeing is right in this area right here, there's a lot of fluid, and it looks like it was running down, but yet it's fairly clean up here. So it seems to indicate that this joint may have failed, and that's where we were getting our leak. So we're going to go ahead with the replacement. We don't see any other issues at this point. Our catch pan has caught the bulk of the mess, and as soon as we get done with this this whole ordeal, we're going to get the power washer after this thing and clean it up real good after we get the hoses reconnected. So it's time to get back on with the hoses. So starting with the high pressure hose, these things have a rubber O-ring that sits right here. These are flare tight, so the O-ring goes over the flare. And we're going to take a little bit of our power steering fluid and we're going to lubricate these O-rings. Anytime you install O-rings, always a good idea to lubricate them with a compatible fluid. Obviously for a power steering system, power steering fluid would be compatible. So we're going to drop this down in here, and clearly looks like the right order in which to do this is to install the high pressure, then install the low pressure, and hopefully that'll fix her up. So we'll get this one installed and then we'll move on to the low pressure. Alright, so what we did was we took the low pressure return hose off of the old one. We recovered both the clamps, and we also recovered the tube-in fitting that connects to the steering box. And so now what we've done, we've just taken the piece of hose that we bought to replace it, and it's a power steering return hose, and we've cut it to roughly the same length, slightly longer. If it's a little too long, we can always trim it. The other way around, it doesn't work so good. So we've also recovered the protective sleeve that was on it, and we're going to use that protective sleeve on this piece as well. And we'll place this protective sleeve wherever it might want to rub up against the high pressure hose or any other contact points. So we're going to put this end back in. It didn't come with a replacement O-ring for this fitting. Again, with it being a low pressure fitting, it's probably not a big deal. So we're going to begin, actually, we'll get that in a minute. We'll begin by putting the clamp back on the hose. And then we'll put this piece on, reseal the clamp, and the other end right now, we're just going to put the clamp on it, push it down on there a little ways after we recover it. We're going to go ahead and begin by installing the flare fitting down here onto the steering box. Again, that's an 18 millimeter. I don't have an 8 millimeter flare tube wrench, so we're just using a standard 18 millimeter. And then, not going to tighten it yet. I'm going to make sure that I can get alignment down here. May have to move some things around, I'm not sure. So we're going to put it on to the return point, which is at the bottom of the reservoir, our steering fluid reservoir. And then, let's see where we're going to go from there. This thing is all up against the block, and I think that's the eye. I think before we go back and look at the routing, we would find that this piece actually was like this. There you go. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but look at the alignment of your hoses before you take them off. Make sure it makes sense to you. And there is the only rub point concerns are going to be against the radiator hose primarily. A little concern there, but it's doable. So we'll tighten this up, put that clamp on, and try to get this finished up. Okay, so we finished up now installing the return hose. It installs here on the back of the reservoir. We got it cut basically to the stock length it had to begin with. Be sure and look at your orientations about pathways, which way your tubes flow. Also, there's a tubing protector sleeve that was on the old one. We transferred it to the new one as well to keep any rubbing between hoses to be not an issue. So pretty happy. We're going to do cleanup. There's a ton of dirt and power steering fluid down there that's really gumming up all the suspension parts down there. So we're going to get all that cleaned up, and before we reinstall the box, again, the box is pretty straightforward. One bolt here, one up behind the box, and then one down inside the box. So we'll get that knocked out, and we're going to call this job finished. We have filled it with power steering fluid. Whenever we get done, get everything back together, crank it up, we're going to turn the rack all the way one direction, all the way back a number of times until we get quiet operation, smooth operation, our fluid level is stabilized, and it's just a matter of filling and repriming everything and make sure that you've got fluid from hither to end. So I hope this is helpful to you. At least you now see kind of what it takes to get down to the steering box and to manage those hoses. So thank you for watching. Bye-bye.